Okay. I think you've got your crew and it's 7 o'clock.
Okay,
Duncan will not be joining us tonight. He's out of town.
so we can get started. There. Okay, so we have Monica joining us remotely, and Duncan is out of town, and the rest of us are here in person. So for those in the room, if there's an emergency, you can go out the back of the room, and either way down the hallway, there's exits in both directions. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, we will keep it as is. Open to the public for items not related to the agenda. Keith, go ahead. Yep, yep. Yes, please. And if you can state your name for the record.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right, I'm Keith Epstein, a member of the public, and I'm also an Energy Committee member, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the Energy Committee today. I came to talk about bike parking on a slightly different topic from what's on the agenda tonight. So I looked through my records today, and it was 6 years ago that I came to the Planning Commission and asked that we update our bike parking rules. And so that request led to a lot of research and development, and now we have the rules that we have. And now that they've been in place for several years, and we're starting to see more people using e-bikes, I think it's time to revisit those rules and potentially update them. Because South Burlington continues to develop in a less car-centric way, and e-bikes are becoming more common. So I'd like to request that the Planning Commission consider taking a look at these rules at some point in the near future. And I have a few more details, but I wanted to pause there and see if anybody had any questions on what I just said.
I guess in the picture, you said, how does the change with e-bikes make a change in what you're requesting?
Yeah, so if more people are riding e-bikes, likely more people will choose to bike rather than drive their car. So I'm thinking it creates more demand for the bike parking.
So we are considering today 13.03 and some changes. Would it be appropriate to consider Keith's request at the same time we consider that table 13-3 today, or is that a different topic?
Yeah, so I think what would probably make more sense is to move ahead with what's in the draft, and then either us or one or multiple committees maybe do a little research on like what the changes should be, since we haven't seen like written language and it wasn't warned for the hearing. But I mean, it seems like a very worthwhile topic. You're right, there's been a lot of change in the types of users and the types of bikes in the last many years. So I mean, do you have a suggestion about how to move forward? Like, is it something that you have some language, or you think the Bike and Ped Committee would want to look at, or kind of what would be the best thing for us to do?
So I don't have any specific language, but definitely it would involve working with the Bike and Ped Committee, probably local motion, looking at what some other communities have done. And I'm thinking looking at potentially the formulas for how we calculate how many different types of bike facilities are required. Potentially looking at enforcement of the existing rules. I've heard some anecdotal evidence that not all the new developments actually meet the rules, and not sure if that's because they didn't build according to what they submitted to the DRB, or if the DRB didn't catch that it didn't meet the rules.
I'm just going to interject on that one and say that for anything that's not a single or two-family home, we do a physical site inspection, and that is one of the things on our checklist. So anything that has gone through since that the latest rules about 5 years ago were adopted should have it at least at the time of inspection, and the rules are that it's bolted in.
Okay,
So if you're seeing anything where it's been removed, please let us know.
okay, yeah, I haven't seen anything specific. I just heard from somebody else mentioned it to me.
Okay, and Monica, you have something? Do you want to go ahead? I think you just unmuted or muted wrong. No, I can't hear, still can't hear you. I think your sound was on, yeah,
Can
that's,
you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that what concerns me about delaying a conversation like this while we have a public hearing tonight is the amount of new work that we expect to see, especially in the transit overlay district. So I actually have issues with putting this kind of conversation off, and I feel that if we were to address it during the public hearing later today, there is still the other opportunity for that to be addressed again with the city council's public hearing. So personally, I think this is something that if there are some areas that we could discuss tonight, I personally have no problems or would recommend that we do put those in and then use that second public hearing to further that conversation. Otherwise, we have a lot of other things, and it will go onto a list and may not be addressed for quite some time. So if there are at least perhaps during the public hearing, if Keith had some at least modest suggestions that seem to be blatant issues that we could address today, I would be fully in support of that.
Certainly. Yeah.
I guess I would feel, I feel like the research is warranted to see how it's been going. You know, it seems a little hasty to mess with the formula just on the very first time it's considered.
Yeah, I think it's knee-jerk legislation to suddenly on the fly do something that, we all agree with, but I think it's irresponsible. So I appreciate you taking some time to, investigate it and
Yeah.
come back to us.
So I guess that's the question. Do you think that it's something that maybe the energy committee would take a role, like a leading role, or do you think we should try to like task the bike and ped committee? Like what, do you have a suggestion as the process? So we
Yeah,
don't just hear from you right now and then
I can't
forget.
speak for the energy committee, but we've got a meeting coming up on Wednesday, and I could certainly bring it up and see if folks are interested. And I imagine the bike and ped committee would want to be involved.
Yeah.
Bike and ped for sure.
Paul, do you have a process suggestion other than?
I'm happy to speak with the staff liaisons on one or both of those and see where their schedules fit. I think Keith's bringing up a really interesting, important topic. And to Ted's point, I think that the answers may looking at some models from other places might be really helpful, because one of the things when you talked about e-bikes, to me, one of the opportunities/challenges they present is that oftentimes they're a lot heavier than a normal bike. So the way in which they get stored, it may not even necessarily be about the number of bikes, but the way in which they get stored in order to support them. So, but that's also speculation on my part. So I think
Yeah,
it's
and
worth a little bit of time to get it right.
and people riding an e-bike that, they cost several $1,000s. If there's a canopy that can be over the bike rack, that can make them more likely to want to ride it and not have to park it out in the rain. So besides just looking at the formula, but looking at what infrastructure is going around it, and potentially even looking at for existing developments that, were built a long time before these new rules are in place. Is there a way that we could say by a certain date, 5 years from now, they all need to come up to the current rules?
So and the rules that you adopted a few years ago, what they do is anytime that project comes in for an amendment to their site plan, they have to come up to the current rule. So it doesn't mean by 5 years, but it's as they come in to do something. And that's gotten dozens and dozens over the last few years. Some property that hasn't had a change in 40 years, we don't really have the authority to go in and make them do something if they're not asking for something, but that is a way that we've caught a whole bunch of them. I shouldn't say caught them up to current standards.
Okay.
I would also say that ongoing education on the subject will be important because we still get a fair amount of pushback on the current ones until we sort of show them examples of, yes, people do ride a bike to a car dealership because sometimes their car's being repaired and that's how they pick up and drop off their car, and or they work there. And
Yeah, I think often the people who work at a place are left out of this conversation where the focus is all on the customers, but people riding their bikes to work is just as important.
So is there general interest in, hearing back from those committees if they have a suggestion for us? Is that, but
No,
maybe
yeah,
not?
Yes, definitely. And I think this last point that Keith made, which is not necessarily not residential, but businesses should be, something that we should consider, and they should consider providing the infrastructure for their employees to come to work by bike or e-bike.
Paul, do you want us to make a motion to have you
I
check
think
with
I've
the
got your
liaisons,
direction.
or-
I'm all
okay.
set. So I will reach out to the liaisons and I'll copy Keith on that. And I'll plan to report back to you on progress in September on that. Okay.
Thanks,
Very
Keith.
good. Thank you.
Anything else not related to the agenda? If you are joining us online, you can always unmute or turn your video on. We are not monitoring the chat, just as a reminder. Okay. Michael, did you have
Yeah.
something?
Well, I had a question on the staff update memo about the wording, which is the council asks the city manager to develop a proposal to implement such an ordinance. And I think the city council asked the city manager to draft the ordinance, not develop a proposal to implement, which could be done in parallel, but certainly would come after for sure.
I would agree. The council's direction was to advance as precipitously as possible. And I use the word implement in a broad sense because I think the council was interested both in as soon as possible developing an ordinance and on its heels developing the infrastructure for it. So I apologize if I was a little
apologies.
brief with my wording.
No
Thank you.
apologies necessary or accepted.
Any other announcements? From anyone, staff or commissioners?
I have a sort of a partial announcement, which is that you have worked off and on for the last couple of years with one of the members of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, Regina Mahoney. And I'm thrilled to report that she was hired last week as the first ever city manager for the city of Essex Junction. So we're very, very thrilled, and we've worked with her, and we just couldn't be more elated for her and for the city there. She's done really quality work with us. So
I think the downside of that is that she's not going to be directly working with us.
Yes.
So we're happy for her.
that's
Is Monica, were you going to say something? Okay, I think you're muted.
Can't
still.
figure out how to unmute. Yes, no, I was
Yes.
applauding because I was waiting for you to say she was joining South Burlington in some manner. So I take back my applaud, but yeah, good job, Regina. Mm.
Yes, we'll
Can
miss
always
her.
be poached back.
Okay, so we can move into, so it says 7:15, but it was
it
warned
was
for
warned for 7
7.
o'clock.
Okay.
So yep.
So our public hearing was warned for 7. It's now after that, so we're gonna get started on that. So,
Need a motion?
yes, please.
Okay, I move to open the public hearing to address possible amendments to the land development regulations.
Okay, do we have any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of opening the public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Monica also had her hand up visually. Okay, is there anything from staff? Would this be a good time to talk about some of the items from the council? the legal counsel?
Legal counsel, sure. So, really, they were very minor changes, from, legal counsel. You'll see that they're in there. The one that I did want to draw your attention to that I noted, to by email was that you had asked us specifically about whether the city attorney felt that it was clear enough that in the southeast quadrant, if somebody is doing a traditional neighborhood development PUD type, that the requirement for TDRs to be used when you're exceeding 1.2 units an acre, as has been the case for the last 15 years, remains in place. She felt that there was an opportunity to make it a little bit more clear, and so did add a sentence in there to that effect. So that was the main thing I wanted to draw your attention to. Michael, when we get to a little bit later after public comment, had a couple of questions for us earlier today that I've got an update on for you as well. So,
Great,
Um,
so,
but yeah, that's about all I had to report on legal comments, but I'm happy to field any additional questions.
Monica?
Yes, I'm sorry. So Paul, you, and I'm trying to follow along with where that legal comment was. I had a really difficult time reading the packet over my phone, so I'm not fully up to date on the legal comments there. Can you just say that again? Does this pertain to the excellent point that Andrew brought up in one of his first meetings, asking about the PUDs and the SEQ? So if they do exceed, they are still to use TDRs, correct?
That's correct. And the city attorney felt that there was an opportunity to be a little bit more clear on that. And I'm going to bring that up for you all right now. Hang on one second. Of the packet, it is page 15. Section 15 CO4, so PUDs, compliance with regulations. So that's the new section in there in red, notwithstanding the superstition of the underlying zoning district. Any application that involves a density increase that exceeds the assigned density of a parcel shall require TDR under Article 19. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and that's what's been made. We agreed that that was the case, but it took sort of reading one section to read another section to read a third section, and anytime we can simplify and make it straightforward, all the better.
Yeah. So, and I thought that that was what we had discussed when we were creating this. So I'm really glad that that was confirmed and that this is clarified.
We had indicated that this was the case all through the public comment and when we presented to the city council. So this is not a change in policy or how we discussed it. It's just making sure that it's really saying what we thought it was saying. Okay, does anyone have anything up here before we open for public comment? Tim?
I did have a question on, let me see, 2205, 2.03, section under definitions. And I just a quick question, and I know what the word sever means, but
What page on the packet just?
I think it's will be 4,
6 of the packet. I
is it
think.
6 of the packet? Okay. Okay. But it's definitions, and it does, it's transferred development rights. And then it says, the development potential of a parcel of land assigned by these regulations, which may be severed from a parcel, the sending parcel. I'm not quite, could you explain that? I'm not quite sure.
Sure. So, as you know, conceptually, the way a TDR program works is that you have an assigned amount of density, 1 unit an acre, just for simplicity's sake. And then you can move that 1 unit to a different parcel so that it gets built, say now on Shelburne Road. You are severing the ability for that house to be built on the original parcel and assigning it to the new place. So it's, you've severed the rights from that property. Somebody can't come into us the next week and say, now I'd like to build a house. It becomes in the deed that unit of density has been sold to somebody else.
Okay.
I
So
think
it's a
I think
legal
it's
term.
clearer if you say you've severed the development right. I mean, that would make it plain to us lay people.
Yeah, I think it's referring back to the development potential of a parcel. Michael, you're saying you think it's unclear the way it's written?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think, well, I've been.
Right, it's
much more familiar with it than most.
Right, it's tricky that I agree with you, Michael, that the word right is probably a good use, but when defining a term, we try to use a different adjective because the title is development right, so we're trying to
Yep.
explain what a development right is. It's the potential of development that is being reassigned somewhere else.
Okay, then let's hear from the public. Any comments that anyone has? If you're joining us in person, you can come up. Um, And then you can state your name, please.
Am I on now?
Mhm.
Yes, good. My name's Linda Bailey. And
Linda, could you just bring it just a hair closer to you?
does that work?
Perfect.
All right, good. I'm Linda Bailey, live here in Vermont. I was very glad to hear you say that this has been looked at by a lawyer, and one of the pages that you put up there on the definition of a transfer development right, I can see that's already been corrected because I was looking at what was on the stuff I originally printed out and it didn't match up at all. There are a few other things that I'm hoping that you guys have caught. I'm not a lawyer, so this is just looking at it from someone who's looking, reading, and trying to make sense of what you've got here. I have to find my right places. Okay, under the Article 19, C. If
Okay,
I'm in,
just let me catch up to you, Linda, so everybody can see at the
absolutely.
same time. So 19 is the new transfer development rights article.
yes,
Okay, so I'm on the first page of that.
so
Just
I am,
follow-
has it printed? I'm on the second page, under 1902C. Let's see, and I'm looking at number 5 under that. And let me look and see if you have changed that. You, okay, you say 10 to 155. Under that 10 VSA chapter 155, you have here that the severance of development rights must include a perpetual conservation easement granted to the city of South Burlington, and I could not find that anywhere in that statute and chapter. So that's a question to me. Since I've read through it and can't find it, then you're referring to it. So I might point that out and ask you to have your lawyer look at that again. Again, I'm not and there are some other ones as well, but I don't want to go through point by point. I am actually much more concerned about the whole idea of having a TDR policy. To my mind, from what I can read, what I can see, what I look at, what it does, the city of South Burlington has made large portions of the SEQ NRP reduced any ability to develop in it and is trying to not have it developed. Well and good, but this looks like it's a way to pay people who don't want to develop the land anyway and have them paid by future residents of our city, which seems a bit nasty to me and not a good way. Seems as though it would be much better if you want higher density in certain areas of the city that you simply zone it that way instead of setting it up so that future residents again are paying for extra for their homes so that nobody will build in an area that someone didn't want to build in the first place. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Is this something that you've considered as part of the ethics of doing TDRs? I don't know if we're supposed to have a conversation or not. It looks like not.
Well, certainly, among other things, the city has an obligation to those landowners who already agreed to rezone their land back in
Mhm.
2003 or whenever it was.
Yep, they agree. If they agreed, then
so
that's what is.
we can't take the TDR option away from them. That was the quid pro quo.
Okay. One of the other pieces that concerns me about the TDRs, the way they've been set up and a deed or two that I have looked at is the right to develop has been sold. That's cool. That's what the law says. That's what that people can do. But it's been the land that it's been severed from can never build again. It's listed as an in perpetuity. And I'm concerned that we're taking away the options for our children and our grandchildren. We know that there are changes happening in the world. As hard as we work for it, we probably are not going to avoid all the consequences of climate change in the world and in the country. We are going to have different needs 30, 40, 50 years from now than we do now. And taking this so that it can never be built on really is stealing from our children and grandchildren. So that's something I'd like to ask you to consider when you set these up as being in perpetuity, instead of in something like for 30 years and then they can be reconsidered, or 50 years, or what is a reasonable amount of time. Is that something you guys would be willing to consider?
Question I have is then
Mhm.
would the landowner pay back the TDR money that they received? Is that the idea?
I'm sorry, I
With
don't
interest.
understand what you
Well,
mean.
The owner is selling
Mhm.
their TDR rights, so they're
Mhm.
receiving money.
Yep.
But now you're saying 20 or 30 years from now, the game should be changed. Well, that person has that money. I would assume
That's
that you want them to pay back.
no, actually, no, because a benefit already was had. Whoever got the extra house or whatever has already built it and gotten it and sold it, and it's there. The person who received the money, that house was built. They've had their land. They haven't been able to build on it further for 30 years or whatever. That I believe the state statute is a minimum of 30 years. Haven't been able to build on it. So that's the price that they paid. And now we just go, okay, city council, look at this. Is that land desperately needed in a different way now? You leave the option open that things can be changed in the future instead of having it set up what we know now forever and ever in perpetuity.
So we don't typically have a lot of back and forth during the public comment period. Just, you did ask that and we didn't respond. So, typically we'll kind of receive all the comments and
Okay.
then,
But I hope
deliberate.
that you will think about these what I consider ethical and moral issues that last longer than just when we're here. Because to speak to you 30 years from now, chances are good it would be somebody new owning the land. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate you listening to me as always and
thank
all of
you.
your hard work.
Very good. Thank you. Does anyone else in the room, Sarah? And then we'll move on to the virtual participants.
I'm Sarah Dopp. I happen to be the president of the South Burlington Land Trust, but also a resident. What I meant to say when I got up here, I'm now going to say something additional, but what I intended to say when I got up here was that I'm very glad, particularly in the matter of being able to transfer development rights out of the SEQ, which this new provision allows for. Very glad to see that. And just to remind everybody that the South Burlington Land Trust has been verbalizing this concept for the 20 years of its existence. And it never made sense to us that if you had an overarching idea that some areas of the city should be preserved as natural spaces, that you would then just, in a very tight geographical area, move the development around. It didn't provide for really preserving the natural features of the SEQ. So this is a great relief to me that finally somebody has listened after all these years and has enshrined a way where we can, in fact, carry out through TDRs our avowed intent to identify areas for development and areas for natural resource protection. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I applaud it, and I'm glad somebody finally heard the message. In light of what was just said, I think maybe there's a misunderstanding about this TDR stuff, and I haven't been on the committee. It's complicated stuff for sure, but it seems to me that what we're doing with the TDR program is allowing the landowner to retain value in his land. If he needs to raise funds but doesn't want to develop his land, he has an alternative through these means to transfer the development where we do want it in the city. So in actuality, we're upholding the rights of the landowners. And we've said as a city, presumably, that we've identified those areas of the city that come hell or high water, maybe literally, these are areas that need to be preserved for the future generations in light of climate change, especially. I mean, this is just ramped up over the last 5 to 10 years, our understanding of what the future could bring and how very important it is to preserve some of our natural spaces. So in actuality, I think we're doing a service to the landowners. They will have had the value of selling the right, but they're not the ones who's going to build the additional property somewhere else. That's why they've sold the right to somebody else to build. So yeah, I would think if they've gotten money from this program for selling their right, that they would have to pay it back if that was going to be reversed at some future time, which I don't think is the whole idea at all. Thanks.
Does anyone joining us remotely wish to speak? You can unmute or turn your video on. Anyone else in the room wish to speak? Okay, I'm going to give another minute to the people joining online in case somebody's having technical trouble. Paul, before we close the hearing, could you confirm that state statute that Linda had mentioned? It seemed like she wasn't able to find the
Sure.
chapter 155.
Yep, sure, absolutely. Okay, so what I have in front of me here is Title 24, Chapter 117, Section 4424, Transfer of Development Rights. And I think that what Linda was speaking about is subsection 5 here. Let me move. Oh, I can't move that another way. So it says define development rights, which at a minimum shall include a conservation easement created by deed for a specified period of time not less than 30 years, granted to the municipality under 10 VSA Chapter 155, limiting land uses solely to specified purposes, but including at a minimum agriculture and forestry. So Linda's correct. A municipality does have the authority to have it be 30 years or more. South Burlington has chosen thus far to have it be in perpetuity, but the minimum under state law is 30 years. Does that answer your question about the authority, Linda?
To me, it did not define transfer of development rights. It just said that you can sell your development rights to the city.
Right. So what the statute does here is it requires the municipality to define it as it says under number 4, well, a density increase and a development right. So it requires the municipality to define what it means by development rights. And so we talk about units per acre and the permanent conservation easement being in the city's land records.
So our municipal panel gives a zoning permit for the land development. So that would be the DRB then.
Right. So what happens is that at the time of a proposed use of TDRs, so somebody's going to buy them, let's say they would normally have been able to build 20 homes and now they're going to build 30 homes. At that time, the applicant must show that they have the option at least to buy those to demonstrate that it's a real thing. And then it's a condition of their approval, if the project is approved, that before a certain trigger point, it's usually that 21st home, that that legal document is submitted to the city attorney to make sure it meets all of the criteria of being of a permanent transfer of development rights. We have a model that we share with folks, but sometimes somebody has something that's slightly different, but it's reviewed by our city attorney. Once it's okayed, we issue the permit and then it gets recorded in the land records.
Nice thing. To non-legal people trying to parse it. Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks, Paul. Any other public comment? Okay, everyone is still on mute, so I think is there anything anyone wanted to bring up while we were still in the public hearing phase?
Little bit. Paul, I think it would be helpful if you went over the map and told people exactly what the sending areas and receiving areas are. I think that would clarify a lot.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Good idea.
And maybe put it up on the screen.
Let me just not make everybody dizzy. I'll find it first and then put it up.
So there's a map of the different areas that's in our packet, which was kind of published along with the regulations, but just to make sure everyone's seen it, we're going to bring it up.
And then I probably should afterwards talk about Michael's question from before you close the hearing. So this is a little map that we put together of the existing and proposed transfer development rights program. So the green, which are these sort of longer strips in the southeast quadrant, those are the sending areas. I should also note I just ran out of colors. Right where my hand is at the very bottom of the screen, it's both a sending and a receiving. That's the neighborhood residential transition district, but the mapping only gave me a certain amount of tools. The blue are the areas that are the current receiving areas, so the other districts in the southeast quadrant. These are largely the same as they have been since about 2006, but you did make some amendments earlier this year where you expanded the natural resource protection district, so that added to the green and took away from the blue. The proposed additions here are the areas in red, so that's Shelburne Road, the Shelburne Road corridor, a little bit of the Williston Road corridor, and a few other spots that are zoned commercial industrial mixed use commercial districts. The red are the areas where you're proposing to eliminate the maximum density altogether. So somebody could buy TDRs up into the maximum scale of the building. The building still has a maximum size, but the number of dwelling units is not artificially capped within it. The orange are areas, this is the Kennedy Drive corridor here. This is Swift Street area, Allen Road area, and a little pocket sort of a little bit north of the old City Hall. Those are the mixed use medium density areas. So typically about 7 dwelling units an acre, and 7 to 10. And what the draft includes is the ability to go up by 50%. So that could be done by inclusionary zoning through affordability or through the purchase of TDRs. The idea of that being that these are areas that are typically transitions to lower density districts. And so making sure that you're sort of continuing this idea of it's a transition rather than sort of an abrupt edge. Was there anything else that you wanted me to cover in that, Paul, or is that?
Just thought it'd be
I had a
helpful.
question. Remind me why we didn't include the Dorset Street corridor north of Swift, up as far as,
in here where the
Orange.
Songbird area and
Well-
the
and north of Kennedy.
so
High school. West of high school.
are you speaking about north of the high school or
Op-
south of the
Well,
interstate?
opposite the high school you've already got, but
Yep.
yeah, north.
So north of the high school, where you see the little streets in there, those are the R4 districts, the 4 units an acre, like the orchards, like Mayfair Park, and you decided not to apply that to the largely single family home neighborhoods. North of that, you're into the form-based code.
Yeah.
And the form-based code as the highest priority area has no density caps
No,
at
I
all.
remember now, R4.
Jessica, I have a question. Sorry, just noticing something. So it's actually the same section that Linda was asking a question about. It's 19.02 C5B, where it talks about the uses, and one of the uses is outdoor non-motorized recreation. And the question is was that new, or had that always been a permitted use in the NRP?
Non-motorized recreation, I believe, has,
Because I mean, that could be like a ball field, right?
well,
Or soccer
keep,
field. Or,
well, I guess keep in mind, can you give me the section reference again before I answer the question?
yeah, sure. 1902 C5B.
Okay, so the difference here, and this is an important one, thank you for bringing it up, Andrew. This, what you're referring to is the limitations within the TDR transfer. That's not the same thing as what the zoning may or may not allow.
Yep.
So our zoning does not allow the things that you just described, but the deed transfer could theoretically keep that open as a if the zoning ever were to allow it. Because it's a low impact use of land. Does that distinction make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I
Because
guess
ultimately what's being transferred is is the ability to build a building. So these non-motorized form of recreation is a
Right,
land use,
but
but
that's
not a
the-
structure.
that's to the receiving, but this is the limit on the sending. And if we're trying to conserve land in perpetuity, allowing the right to kind of mow the forest down and building a ball field in the deed wouldn't seem consistent with that. Is that, and again, is that a change for what's in the existing?
That's to my knowledge, that's not a change.
Okay,
I'm happy to take a look and verify that with city attorney though, if there's
Maybe it
concern.
should be though.
And
I
our,
know we've got the passive recreation definition elsewhere, which would preclude the eventuality that Andrew is concerned about.
Jessica, I had a comment that can tie into this too.
okay, go
I'm
ahead.
just not sure if you
Monica.
can
Well,
see me.
if it's, go ahead if it's related here.
Well, I was thinking I was going to relate this comment to Linda's questions and then furthering to Andrew's, that it seems to me that this particular public hearing is about very specific details pertaining to the current sending and receiving areas basically only. There are bigger questions, and it seems like during comp plan would be maybe an appropriate time to ask and discuss some of these bigger issues and make sure for comp plan that we address what's being said and make enhancements or suggest enhancements in our goals. But it seems like that's kind of getting out of what this public hearing was intended to do. I'm not trying to push those off, but it does seem like there's an opportunity in the comp plan conversations to get into some of what you're talking about. Because I do also have a concern with even what we're doing today. And I wasn't sure if we get into the conversation yet because it's not closed. So are we still just listening? But I still go back to having a real issue with the fact that we're not calling a unit a particular size. So a 10-bedroom home is equal to a studio apartment in our current TDR regulations. And I have some issues with that. But I don't see that as fitting into this public hearing. I debated whether I would just not agree with forwarding this as is to the city council for a second public hearing, but I understand that that is a bigger question. So I would just ask that we be sure in comp plan to maybe discuss some of these things, but keep it separate from this particular public hearing, perhaps.
I had a question for, did you mean the comp plan or that this should go on our list of things that we want to do after these new regulations have been approved?
I think it's worthy of a strategic conversation for comp plan, but that perhaps something else, but I just don't think it fits into this particular public hearing. I think there are some very important strategic questions and review that we should be sure to spend some time with.
And I do see it in the struck language from the old definition, so we're not changing it, so that seems appropriate to then defer a conversation to a future time.
Great. And like Paul said, the actual zoning that's in place does protect both the forests from being cut down with our habitat blocks as well as, so.
Although I do need to be clear that on the forest side, it is a protected right to do forestry as a land operation, not to cut down trees to improve your view, but as a forestry, just like agriculture, that's protected in the state of Vermont, outside of the limitations of our regulations.
Silviculture.
Silviculture, right?
So I don't know if it's appropriate, Paul, to make sure that in the minutes for this public hearing, that there have been 3 questions that have come up during this time pertaining to TDRs, which do not necessarily relate to these proposed amendments. But 3 items of strategic interest that we do want to further at a later time, and just not let that get lost if there's so much.
Certainly, Monica, would you like to repeat them in bullet form so that Sue makes sure that she's got them?
So it sounded to me like Linda's question overall was a question of, since the Vermont state definition gives a local authority the 30-year window. I guess her question was, why is South Burlington doing the permanent? I don't see that changing. I'm just saying it sounded to me like that was a question, and perhaps during comp plan, it's appropriate to acknowledge that and discuss that. The second is, to Andrew's point, can we add more protections for, in perpetuity, Andrew, for the for the land, for the easements, so that they have permanent protection, not just based on potential zoning change. Does that sound right, Andrew?
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
And my comment was a discussion of determining if a TDR should be tied to a square footage unit size.
Okay, Sue, did you get all 3 of those?
Yes.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Great. Okay, any other public comment or? Okay, do we want to move to close the hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
All right. And Monica has her hand up, so we'll be unanimous. Okay, so we can move into yeah, I guess number
now-
6
Now that
for
it's closed-
discussion.
Okay, right, thanks. I do have something for discussion.
Okay, we're moving into discussion. Do you want to go, Monica?
So
Sure.
my question, Paul, was, can you please remind me, in the urban overlay district generic PUD, did we require the multiple unit sizes? Right? They still have to have a minimum of 3 different unit sizes, right? In the generic PUD.
Not in the generic PUD. In
We did
the
it somewhere.
traditional neighborhood, yes. In subdivision, you put it in to say that you're looking for a variety in all subdivisions. But it didn't put a hard number. It just said variety because it's a little bit tricky for all subdivisions to talk about that. And then we had a conversation about how the inclusionary zoning requires that the inclusionary units have the same average number of bedrooms. And so if there is any kind of variability within the market rate, then there must be an equivalent variability within the affordable units.
So my concern, and it ties to what I said for a larger conversation later, but I want to be very clear. I am concerned with the red zone on that map that is telling people that they can build as much density as they want, that the building needs to be the same size, but they can build as much density as they want. Because that to me says, okay, I'm gonna build an entire building of studio apartments. Now, I know that the market will drive what's built. But I continue to be concerned that we are not, especially with the TDRs coming over and opening up that red zone like that, I continue to be concerned that we have no guardrails in place to ensure that we have a diverse housing stock, size-wise.
As it affects the general PUD only though.
I don't know. I'm just looking at that red, the TDR change, and that the general general PUD is what we had talked about, that most of the building that comes into Shelburne Road corridor will be probably using, and we have no guardrail right now. And that big red zone on that map that we just looked at says build as much as you want, as long as you don't change the overall size of the building. So the only mathematical way to do that is to have a lot of small units. So maybe the market will not want that to happen, so it won't, but our documents do not give that guardrail, but we do in other neighborhoods that maybe have a lot of money in them. And I have issues with that.
So just two notes. One, the commission, you did talk a little bit about the idea of establishing some minimum percent that needs to be 2 bedrooms or more. And my recollection was that you decided that while that had some merit, that you didn't want to hold up the TDR as a group. To the question of the mathematical point, there may be instances where that's correct, Monica, certainly. I think that there may also be instances where folks have found that regardless of the unit type, that they've run out of homes before they ran out of building space today. That if you can only do 7 units an acre, it doesn't, you could do it on 5 stories, but they're going to be massive homes. And so you wind up sort of limiting before you get to that. But certainly there may be cases where you're correct on that too.
Well, and just what I recall is that we did decide not to do anything about how many 2 bedrooms, but we simply said, like we do in the other district, requiring 3 different sizes. So, or 2 different sizes. We're not requiring any of that. And I continue to have an issue with that in that red zone. So I don't see it fitting in necessarily to this TDR public hearing, but I wanted to be very clear on that again, that with this document and with this change, we are creating this situation possibility without a guardrail. But we did
So
put the guardrail
I'm
elsewhere.
going to reverse myself and say you are correct, Monica. I had forgotten the general PUD does say in a general PUD with more than 4 residential dwelling units, a mix of 2 or more dwelling types as allowed within the district must be provided. Types of dwellings are differentiated by either housing type or within multifamily structures by number of bedrooms per unit.
Thank
So
you.
did do
Okay.
that in a general PUD. So
Thank
my
you. So
apologies.
that red, okay, good. So that the red on the TDR map will generally be protected by that then,
If
because
they're
they'll-
choosing to be a general PUD, which
Right.
that's not the mode that everybody has to be, but it's the way
Yes.
we've been describing the general PUD is you're getting some additional flexibility in exchange for raising the bar in a variety of ways.
Okay.
And this is one of the ways in which the bar is raised.
Thank you. Thanks for scaring me, and then thanks for taking away my fear.
Anytime. Michael, did you want to address your questions that you had posed to us earlier today?
It's on page 7 in 4.05C. Ends in it ends with a sentence in accordance with the conditions and objectives of this section 4.06. And my question is, are the objectives defined as such somewhere in the text? And if not, should they be defined? Or if not, then we should delete and objectives. So without a definition, it's quite ambiguous for.
So we took a look at it this afternoon, our city attorney and I, and looking back in history, this was not proposed to have changed as part of this amendment. It was just text in black. Looking back in history, it appears that that is a vestige of when 4.06 had a bunch of additional opportunities for flexibility, and the attorney's recommendation is just to delete that line entirely.
Okay.
So that removes any confusion about whether this creates some additional modifications not otherwise granted.
And my second question was in page 20, it's 19.01B. And the sentence reads, where land conservation is a priority, this is transferring to priority areas for development within the city. Let me go back to the text proper. So its purpose. The purpose of this section is to regulate the use of TDRs to encourage open space. Specifically, it is the intention of this section to regulate the transfer of development rights from areas where land conservation is a priority to priority areas for development within the city. And my question is, we need to define where those priority areas are. Because I
So
don't think it's clear anywhere in these regulations.
here's our proposal, and thank you for bringing that up, Michael. This is the section in question. Again, I met with the city attorney. Upon review, we felt that the authority statement, which talks about TDRs are hereby authorized to encourage the conservation, and then the purpose saying to encourage preservation is somewhat redundant. And so instead, why not just collapse it into an authority and purpose statement and say TDRs are hereby authorized in order to encourage the conservation of open space, et cetera, and to direct compact development to identified areas in the city, identified being those which the chapter has identified. If you chose, you could also say to areas within the city as appropriate for more dense development, but that's your choice. The definition is what's in the section later on as to where you've chosen to allow it.
So it's in table 19.
Right.
Yeah.
So we felt that that's a good point. We can be more clear. I'd be perfectly happy to just end it right after the word city, but what do you all think?
Paul, is the map that you showed us today, is that going to become a map that goes into the document? Or is that just for this meeting? Because it is very helpful. And if we're doing what you're saying, to Michael's point, I think having that map included as an attachment or a reference to this would be helpful.
I hadn't been considering it to be part of it. And I guess I don't see any reason it couldn't be, though I might suggest that I guess there's no reason it couldn't be.
But it doesn't serve to do what the new wording does. This, I think I'd be happy with ending at the word city.
Is everybody okay with the change ending with the word city?
Well, but then can you reference the map? I mean, there may be people that have questions about exactly where this can happen. And the map seems to be.
Well, the place where it will be formally, this is where it is officially formally stated.
should reference table 19-1. The map is illustrative.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd be comfortable with referencing table 19-1. Yes, table 19-1.
That would work best for me.
Yeah, that seems better than the map because some of those districts maybe sometimes change over time. We might forget to update the map.
And again, that might be a map that goes into the comp plan as part of our
Yeah.
goal kind of conversation, a version of it.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea, Monica, kind of as a planning and visualization tool, but
Does that work for you all?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention, Michael.
okay. Anything else, Michael? Was that?
No, that was it for me.
Okay, anybody else?
Ready for motion?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Move to approve, land development regulation 22-05 and LDR 2206 as drafted in today's meeting, August 8th, 2022.
Can
And to
we
submit
add, and as amended by you tonight?
as amended by commission tonight, submit the amendments and previously approved planning commission report to the city council.
Second.
Okay, or any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And Monica has her hand up, so she visually agreed, so that is unanimous. Very good.
Thank you, everyone. That's a lot of work and is potentially a significant opportunity for seeing more housing in areas served by transit and infrastructure and all of that. So it'll probably be a little while. This is the kind of thing that takes a little while before you start to see it, but it's
Thank you, Paul. for
Thank you
helping
for your
bring
work.
that to fruition.
well,
I
thank you to
know.
Kelsey, who's on parental leave. She was a primary author, but happy to play our role. And thank you to all those who served on the TDR committee that led to this as well, that this is not just the last 3 months of work. It was a heavy lift for many people
For many
years before. So
Yes, very much so. Wonderful. So we can move on to our next item, which is looking at the commuting patterns, business districts profile and demographics that was prepared by one of our interns.
I just want to take a few minutes here because there's a couple of, I thought, really interesting nuggets of information that you're going to be seeing a lot more of. Those who are serving on, who've attended some of the climate action plan task force meetings are going to be not surprised to see this. But the commuting pattern data is really, really interesting in our city. And it's, let me just pull this up. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of key things here. So what Coley did was she looked by quadrant in the city, which is essentially matched up to, or it is the census blocks. When the 2020 census was done, we had worked with the Regional Planning Commission and then the Census Bureau to align the census blocks to our 4 quadrants as close as we can within census so that we have, this is the first time we're actually starting to see data that reflects the different parts of our planning areas. There's 2 main stories out of commuting. One is that the likelihood that somebody today lives and works in the same area is very low. Very few people live and work in the same census district. The good news, though, is that the overwhelming majority of people do live and work within 10 miles. And so from a transportation perspective, how we've been starting to, or we've been having conversations with the years, but we're really looking at the infrastructure and the tools to think not just about South Burlington, but South Burlington as it relates to Burlington, Winooski, Colchester, Essex Junction, because I got to name them separately now, Williston, and the folks to the south, and think about it all together. So when we think about, say, the big grant of the bike ped bridge over the interstate, it's wonderful that that it will be connecting Quarry Hill Road to City Center, but it's also connecting all of Burlington. And as we look at places like Kimball Avenue, the connections over the culvert into Williston are just as important as the ones within our community. And so I think this is a really key data point for us to be thinking about, of thinking of a 10-mile circle more than a just within ourselves, and to also, certainly there's a lot of people who drive a long distance, but the overwhelming majority, about 80%, are in a very short distance, and we can think about our transportation with that in mind.
I love these direction plots. I think they have a lot of information in them because I think what's really neat to me is it's not only the volume of people going in a certain direction, but it also is showing you how far in both. I didn't catch how far the first time I looked at one.
In these little compass
Yeah,
maps.
yeah, the
Yeah.
green is close commutes. Obviously you get to the lake, you can't go that far, more than 10 miles in that direction, but it's just interesting to see like the yellow ones, like there are people going a further distance, like to the southeast.
Right,
and-
but that also does reflect that if people are commuting further, it's more likely from St. Albans than from Holton, which isn't a huge, it makes sense when we think about it, but you're right. I mean, that's where the bulk of our.
Ted and then Monica.
Yeah, a couple of questions. There's the section, I don't have numbers, but it's, I think, almost at the end of the piece, and it summarizes South Burlington at a glance data.
Yeah.
That one. And so they have housing and housing vacancy, but then the section said poverty. And I didn't quite, I didn't understand what those numbers is, 18 to 64. Are those the poverty rates of the respective age groups?
Yes, so
Okay.
so what that's saying very quickly is that is 5 to 6% of our population in each of those categories. So 5.5% of those over 65, and almost 7% of those 18 to 64 are below what the census would consider to be the poverty level.
So in a way, like 25% of our population is considered poverty.
No, that's within each category. So the bottom one here where it says percent in poverty, 6.5.
Okay, that's the total. That's the
Right, so it's within each of those under 18, 6.5. It's not, they're not cumulative, they're each they're each within their own categories there.
But it says 18 to 64, way to the right, it says 12,000, 12,692, the population, but then it says 6.8%.
Right,
So
so
I'm not it's that-
6.8% of them
Yeah.
are in poverty. So if you were to add, it's a little bit of a funny table, that if you add the numbers together, you get the South Burlington population, but the percents are within
Okay.
each category.
Okay, great. The other thing that I got out of this is I'm hoping that the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission looks at this, because again, we've all discussed that the buses might have 1 or 2 people at most, these massive buses. It would almost be cheaper to give people little coupons for taxis. But our whole, infrastructure really should be based on mostly 10 miles. So there should be a significant, I still would love to bike to work, but I think it's suicide going down Van Sicklen Road, North Brownell Road, Williston Road. But so, how do we really take someone from Butler Farms to Winooski safely, or?
Right, and I think that's the exact message out of this, is that so many trips are 10 miles. So whether we're talking about a transit option or a bicycle option or a micro transit like they're trying in Montpelier, or other ideas, that there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
And also, this goes into a slightly different direction, but the concern that some people have that's dissipating, but about range of electric vehicles, or is an electric vehicle that's a hybrid a beneficial over being just a straight gas? And this would say to me, if somebody got a plug-in hybrid, the overwhelming majority of their trips are never going to use the gas. And so if that's an affordable option for folks, that
Absolutely.
may be a way to help meet our climate goals.
Yeah.
And 81% being less than 10 miles, that would also work for a pure EV.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
No range issues
Really
there.
fascinating though.
Yeah.
Really
So
fascinating.
those were the things that I wanted to draw your attention to. This was a project most specifically sort of in the world of economic development, but I thought that Coley put in some really good time, and she would have presented, but she has continued her summer, took part of the summer to be a summer and is traveling elsewhere. So
Nice.
I have one
Monica?
question. Yeah, Paul, can you go back to the first map again with the circles?
I sure can.
So I don't know how easy it is to get this information. But the other thing, you know, as we're preparing for comp plan, and we've talked about ideas of like, how can South Burlington provide car parks to minimize the amount of traffic going through South Burlington and into Burlington and vice versa. I'm wondering if we could see the information that shows how many people pass through South Burlington that don't live here and don't work here. I don't know how to come up with that number unless we just subtract it from these folks and we look at total traffic.
That's a great question, Monica. I can pose that question to the Regional Planning Commission. They have a if you're a data nerd, they have a fascinating regional transportation model that divides the whole county into these little tiny squares, and there's a modeling of every origin and destination that comes in there, so that they can figure out, you know, if a new road is built or a road is widened or an intersection is changed, how's it going to affect things. So I suspect that there's some probably pretty good data from that as to who's going through the city
So
without stopping.
So not to be asking them for too much, really what would be of interest is back to that question. If there are opportunities where we could help commuters lessen their mileage by on the outskirts of our community, you know, placing car parks and doing different things. I mean, I think that's really what would be of interest. So
Okay.
it
There
might
is one
seem-
that is under construction by Exit 12 in Williston now, which is a
Mhm.
piece of the puzzle. But yes, absolutely. I'll reach out to them as we
Thank
start
you.
to put together the transportation chapter.
So that's part of what that big construction project is?
Yes.
That's probably going from Williston to Montpelier, not from Williston to Burlington.
Probably not into Burlington, but it's, I mean, like the Richmond parking lot, it's
Yeah.
it's wherever people decide that it's
Right.
worth stopping and sharing a car and then going somewhere else.
Or the bus
Yeah.
that does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just from, I mean, I'll use it because I have a lot of coworkers where we'll want to carpool and we have to find a spot to carpool from. So we'd like stop at the Fish and Wildlife place or Dick's Sporting Goods. And I mean, it always felt like I wasn't supposed to be leaving my car there for the day, but we wanted to carpool and it made sense. So I think it's
Turn
gonna
your,
be a
mic-
good-
turn your mic off, Jessica. Just kidding.
That brings up
Yeah.
up a question that I think Helen had mentioned to me, that I wonder why the Staples Plaza, why we could not negotiate some park and ride places there. There's a big parking lot, you know, a lot of room, but it seems like a logical spot as opposed to having to hoof it to Richmond or to even to Williston, but you could, so.
anything
The
else?
one down at the bus depot off Pine Street.
Mhm. Yep.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And their bus is right there.
Yes, and the City of Burlington and the Regional Planning Commission are looking at the possibility of building something more significant right there.
Yeah.
I think largely to consolidate all the different places that people who work at the medical center currently park, which is all over the
Yeah.
area. So
Yeah.
It seems like a
Um,
great conversation for comp plan again, you know, some focused conversations specifically on that.
Good. Remind us.
Any other comments on this? Or questions? Okay, thanks, Paul. And thanks to the intern. So we can move on to item 8, which is discuss an initial request for possible zoning amendment for the Shelburne Road, former Hannaford's area. And You can introduce
evening.
yourself. So, so this is the first time that we are hearing this. So because it's an initial request, typically we hear the requests and answer questions and then pick like maybe a general idea, but we don't get into like we typically don't come to some conclusion, tonight. It's like really just an initial hearing of, the issue. So go ahead.
So good evening. My name is Liam Murphy. I'm an attorney with MSK Attorneys in Burlington.
Liam, I just want to make sure, did you turn the little green light on there?
There we go.
Perfect. Thank
Let
you.
me start that again. Liam Murphy, MSK Attorneys in Burlington. I am representing Tesla Inc. And what we're seeking to do is try to reuse the old Hannafords that's next to Lowe's on Hannaford Drive. As you know, Hannaford's moved next door to the old Kmart Plaza 4 years ago, and that property has been empty since that time. The issue, of course, is that the C1 auto zone ends one property to the south of this property. The C1 zone was drawn around, basically around the existing dealerships. It came, from Mitsubishi north on the west side to Nissan, and then it did a little catty corner across the street to include Shearer Chevrolet, and then also the Heritage dealerships. And within that, there really are no spaces to put a new dealer. So there's one vacant parcel, that parcel between Lowe's and the Olive Garden and the bank and the gas station that are on Route 7 there. Between the two parcels. So, obviously the easiest request would be to say, can we extend that C1 auto zone 2 parcels north to allow for the old Hannafords to be reused for a Tesla distributorship and service center. When I started first talking to Paul about this back in early June, he expressed some concerns that if both parcels were made C1 auto, that both parcels may end up that way, and that there hadn't been some thought or some hope that that vacant parcel might ultimately use housing. So he asked me to explore some different possibilities that the board could consider for allowing this use, but not necessarily just extending the boundaries. So I prepared and have submitted to you 3 thoughts that you could do, and I've tried to draft the amendments. They're all really pretty simple amendments, but the first would be to create a more limited zone for green products in general. That is, for those 2 parcels, it could be used for solar, wind, any alternative energy business of sales, distribution, manufacturing, not necessarily manufacturing, but sales, distribution, and electric automobiles. That way, you could be encouraging the location of some businesses that are committed to energy conservation and other environmentally friendly areas. So you could just create a C1 green zone and permit those type of uses on those couple of parcels, or you could actually, change it as to any other parcels you chose, but there you could encourage that way. The second would be just to have an EV auto zone. So you would expand the auto zone, but you would limit it to electric only or non carbon producing vehicles. That way, again, you'd be encouraging the location of electric auto dealers in South Burlington. And the third would be a little broader, and that would be, you know, there are some vacant buildings in South Burlington that, for whatever reason, the lack of zoning, just the way they're oriented, haven't gotten developed and they remain empty. So the other is to do an adaptive reuse that would allow, and you could limit it to a commercial district, you could have it in the entire city, but and I threw out some ideas here, but basically the whole concept being that they have to be vacant for a certain period of time, 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And they can't be any increase or very little increase in the impervious surface, because the whole purpose of this is to try to reuse a property. And you wouldn't want to have something knocked down. So, but sometimes there might be some changes, so you could limit it to 20% or something like that. So these are policy possibilities that I think you would have the four possibilities. A simple one would be extend the auto zone. Second would be to create a green zone, and the third would be to create an EV auto zone, and the fourth is adaptive reuse. And in all of these cases, there are means that are good policy choices that are following up the studies that you have been undertaking to encourage more environmental friendly development. You know, reusing a building like that doesn't increase the impervious surfaces, doesn't need new structures to be built, is something that should be encouraged. So obviously, our challenge is that, you know, we have been started, I guess, the discussion in May, and the Tesla would very much like to move to South Burlington and get this process moving. To do that, we do need some amendment to the current zoning in order to allow that. I know there are some Tesla folks on the video, and I think maybe somebody also from there might want to add some materials about this.
Sure. Hi, this is Zach Kahn. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Hi.
yes, Zach, yep.
So I'll try to go quickly. I just, I wanted to just, opine, on why Tesla is looking at this location, looking in South Burlington. My name is Zach Kahn. I'm a senior policy advisor at Tesla. I've been with the company nearly 3 years, and throughout that time, I've been engaged in trying to bring Tesla to the Vermont market. And I'm really hopeful that we can work with the Planning Commission to find a solution that would allow Tesla to move forward with our first sales, service, and delivery location in northern New England. I think adding Tesla to the South Burlington community would help the city meet its EV adoption goals that were laid out in your recently released draft climate action plan, providing more EV options to residents, but also Vermont businesses that are interested in fleet electrification, but have been hesitant because there hasn't been a place to service these vehicles. I was impressed with the scale and the ambition of the climate action plan that you put together, and I did think it was very much aligned with Tesla's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. The vast majority of Tesla owners in Vermont are located in this region, and we think this would be a perfect spot for us to enter this market. Tesla currently accounts for about 75% of annual electric vehicle sales in the United States, but less than a third of EVs in Vermont. And I think having a physical sales and service location in Vermont will lower a major barrier to electric vehicle adoption. It will provide comfort to potential customers that there's going to be a local service and support for the product, and it will be quite frankly, a huge relief to our current customers who have been patiently waiting for a service location in Vermont. I think we have about more than 800 Tesla drivers in Vermont right now. We are eliminating about 9 million pounds of CO2 equivalent per year with those drivers. We've invested a lot already in Vermont in terms of our supercharging, which is our charging system. We've got 4 locations in the state, a total of 36 chargers, 8 of which are nearby in near the Healthy Living Market and Cafe on Dorset Street. And we have a bunch of new locations under development. I think, not only South Burlington, but the state of Vermont has made EV adoption a priority and has a lot of incentives to do so. We also worked with the legislature to pass a bill signed by the governor a little over a year ago that opened up the state for dealerships like Tesla, where we sell directly to consumers. So we really look forward to investing in South Burlington, training and hiring Vermonters for jobs at this sales and service location, and contributing to the tax base and just becoming a bigger part of this community. Thanks for allowing us to speak. Liam and I look forward to answering any questions and hope that we can move forward with this location in due time. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to go and then we'll move to
Just
commissioners?
20 seconds on table setting. Thank you, Zach and Liam. Just a quick note for you all, just a reminder that however you think about the use, think about the use and the definition, not the user from the role of the Planning Commission. And part of my homework to Liam was that the city's responsibility is to think about use in its context, and however you choose to define context, but not to think about a single parcel and a single activity, because that would be spot zoning. And hence Liam thinking about some possibilities for you to consider, and just to get your minds churning on these or many other options, or saying that this is not the direction that you'd like to go in that area, which would also be guidance. So that's my table setting.
Okay, Ted, you had your hand up, and then Michael.
Great. Kevin, question I have is, how many square feet are you looking for your building? I mean,
I have been focused, I honestly don't know, because I've been focusing on the policy question here. Zach may have an answer to that.
oh, is it Zach? I'm sorry. It says, Zach, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and my colleague Stephen might
Right.
know the exact specifications, but it would be taking over the Hannaford's location. Stephen, I don't know if you have the top of your head how many square feet that was.
No, but so essentially it wouldn't be expanding the building. It'd be sort of within.
No, yeah, as to that particular location, the concept was reuse the building, reuse the parking lot. Nothing, the facade will look different. Obviously, you need garage doors and such things, but that was one of the great benefits for this, is to be able to reuse an existing building without expanding its size or the impervious surface.
And
That
are you
building's
planning
a
to?
little over 40,000 square feet.
40, okay, thanks. Are you planning to buy or rent? Jack,
Again, I'll defer to my colleague Stephen, who know, but I believe we're leasing the property.
Yeah, that whole area is owned by the local Parmelo family.
so it'll be a rental.
Yes.
Correct.
That's correct.
Question for Zach. Is this going to be principally a service facility?
No,
Or-
sales, distribution, and service.
Yeah, it would basically be like a typical dealership, except, it would just be Teslas. We would be selling to new customers and then also servicing existing customers.
Monica, and then Andrew. You're muted, Monica.
Okay, Paul Connor, please let me know if my question is being too focused, but I am thinking from a full zoning perspective. Zach, can you help me understand the difference? Well, and because this concept of an EV auto zone came up, can you help me understand the difference in number of employees or anything like that between a EV zoning, an EV auto zone versus the current auto zone that we have? It might be kind of a hard question to answer, but
I can start and Liam can
Yeah.
fit in, add anything to it. I mean, I think I would just say, our sales and service locations are are usually around 25 to 50 employees, depending on the size. This one will probably start a little bit smaller, and then as we grow into the regional grow, I think that's fairly typical in terms of the number of employees at a traditional dealership. I think that the difference is certainly the types of vehicles and sort of what goes into those vehicles or what doesn't. You know, there's no fluids, you know, no oil changes, that sort of thing. So it's different in terms of the service activity, but in terms of the actual employees, you know, typically we look at about 25 to 50 employees, and you know, significant investment in the first year, and we'll have to, you know, train up service employees to learn how to do service on an electric vehicle. So we've seen in other locations where we come in, we do a lot of training. Oftentimes, you know, we train up service folks who then become, as other dealerships move and bring in more EVs, they become very hireable, which can be frustrating for us, but we do get to, you know, train a lot of folks. We've had a lot of work that we've done over the years on EVs. So we have a good process there to bring in employees and get them up to speed.
Thank you. So I had another question for Paul Connor then, and I don't know if we do this now or if this is a conversation for later, but I don't know if doing something like an EV AutoZone is permissible. And if it is, my question would be for either now or a later discussion, would we not have any ability to put EV requirements on our current AutoZone?
Paul, can I answer?
Sure, go for it, Liam.
Let me say, you know, obviously with existing dealerships, you have pre-existing uses, and I doubt that you could force existing auto dealerships to have like a minimum of number of EV cars, because they have been approved already for their uses as traditional auto uses. As far as there are many parts of the city where there are very specific uses permitted and other uses not permitted. The proposal that I suggested is not, this is a C1 district. So it's not a matter of making any other uses not permitted there. It's just to add another use to the district. So it would, and that happens. There are many districts where you distinguish between some districts have some activities that you allow and you don't in other districts.
So Monica, to follow up on that, I guess what I would say is that the commission's responsibility is to consider why a given use should or shouldn't be allowed in the city, and then why a given use or form of development, and it's not necessarily uses in the form-based code, it's all about form and not uses, but why in one area and not another area? What is the policy objective that the city is trying to advance? I think if the commission is comfortable with why with having a clear policy objective that is moving forward with, that is a broad umbrella under which zoning is permissible. But I think that question does need to be asked, and it's an important question of what is the policy objective that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, let me say, I did read the city plan, and I saw nothing in that city plan that would contraindicate any of the three proposals that I have shown there. Remember, the underlying zone here is still commercial, and that is what's proposed in the city plan, is that it is a commercial. So it's not changing it from that perspective in any way. It's just adding a use that is not now listed. And you know, the justification for the AutoZone literally was, we're just going to draw a line around what's there now, and that seems to be and that just limited it to saying that there won't be any expansion. And one of the benefits of this particular property is that it's not on Route 7. I mean, it's not going to add to that linear pattern of auto dealerships that are now come, you know, from Mitsubishi all the way north to Shearer.
Andrew and then Michael.
So is this just an opportunity to ask questions? Are we gonna have an opportunity for kind of discussion and comment after this?
Both. I think you can ask questions or you can make a comment.
Okay, well, I'll make a comment then. This is terribly exciting to me, both personally and for the city. I think it's just be terrific to get a Tesla facility of the kind you described, and would be really, really beneficial to our climate action goals. I also love the idea of option 3, kind of combining this with our, I think, independent goals of reuse and redevelopment of underused buildings. I think option 3 just brings together these concepts in a really compelling way. I might want, if we choose to go that route, or if we choose to do this at all, I personally would probably want to limit the discretion of the DRB in option 3, but maybe enunciate good uses, good adaptive reuses, including alternative energy and sustainable transportation products, maybe among others, as those kind of permitted uses.
Yeah, obviously, the way I drafted it was just looking at adaptive reuses from many different communities. And there are a lot of different ways that could be approached. I just threw out some suggestions based upon what I have reviewed from zoning ordinances around the country.
Michael?
Yeah, 2 things. I wanted to comment on something that Paul said. The city does have an objective that fits in with this, because our objective, at least in the Climate Action Task Force, is to increase the number of EVs in use here. And prior to this evening, I made a few notes for myself, which have been already noted, but I'll say it again, that repurposing existing buildings aligns with the city's development objectives and with the Climate Action Task Force. There's no new or added impervious surface, if I understood correctly. It would require no new stormwater infrastructure, because Hannaford's already was there. It would increase the South Burlington tax revenue. Positive impact of 25 to 50 new wage earners in South Burlington. And I'm assuming Tesla pays good wages. So well-paying jobs, to quote our president. So I think this has a lot to go with it. For complete transparency, I am a Tesla owner and a member of the Vermont Tesla Owners Association. And I know from them that they would be over the moon, not having to waste tens of thousands of miles a year in, albeit clean energy, but it's a waste of electricity to drive from here to wherever else you have to go, Montreal, Latham, Peabody, wherever it is. It's a real waste of energy, and is in total contradiction to our effort to cut down vehicle miles traveled, whether on EVs or any other vehicle. So all in all, I love the idea.
Monica? You wanna
Right.
go ahead?
I want to follow up on what Michael just said, though, about clarifying the Climate Action Committee didn't say not just to increase EV. I think the goal is to decrease dependence on fossil fuel. So I guess when I'm looking at this from a bigger picture, non-brand associated comment, I'm looking at this pink zone with cars in it, and I would really like to see us either diminish it or require stricter EV on that. And that's what I personally don't like the idea of adding auto when we have, I'm looking at your, from the comp plan itself. You just, you took my screen away when you did that.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to make it easier for you, Monica. There we go.
It's okay. You're helping. No, that's fine. I'm looking at the, I'm looking in the LDRs. I'm looking at the zoning map, if that's what you wanted to pull up. So if you wanted to find that one, Paul, but my comment is to just add auto does not seem to be a wise. Somebody used the phrase knee jerk earlier. I'm going to just throw that back out there. I would just not expand auto so quickly, and I would really look to our greater goal of diminishing fossil fuel and therefore putting more requirements within our current auto or diminishing it. And I know that we can't change someone's current uses, but I do know, for example, that one of the huge dealerships there seemed to change ownership recently. And I wonder if there isn't anything we can do with when one current business decides to cease, can a next tenant have to inherit new regulations? You know, I think we're doing that on San Remo Drive, that it's not auto, but on San Remo Drive, it's industrial, I think, but any new tenant cannot be anymore. So that's my 2 cents, that just to continue adding auto is as taking up a lot of our city's space here. And it doesn't necessarily, by just adding, it doesn't immediately address the reduction of fossil fuel, because there's still a big fossil fuel based auto zone there. So how can we make an opportunity like this help our greater goal?
And I think that's a good point, Monica. Ted, do you
Yeah,
know?
Paul, I have a question with regard to the zoning. What kind of housing can be built in that area now?
So today, that area that is the C1 R15, so 15 dwelling units an acre. It could be a general PUD, so it can be either on each site or redistributed. And if the council passes what you just approved about half an hour ago, the density becomes the maximum as well. There is no more maximum. It's just what the height and bulk limits are.
Mhm, okay. My dilemma is that, you know, obviously Tesla's a great company without question. And yeah, I'm sure they would be a good, great addition to the community or the greater community. And I have to believe that if they don't go here, as the gentleman said, representative from Tesla, that most of the Teslas, and I see a lot of them now, probably mostly betas, but they'll probably go somewhere in Chittenden County, which is where the bulk of their, you know, business is. My dilemma is I'm looking at the corner of that building and, oh, maybe it's 100 feet across the property line to the old Kmart Plaza dash Hannaford's now. And it just is screaming, you know, we've spent so much time about wanting density in the transit zone. And I just look at this and I think it would be a crime not to have housing there, an absolute crime. You know, we're talking about it over and over again. We want the housing in the transit zone. We don't want it in the southeast quadrant. So we have Meadowlands as a possibility, you know, Williston as a possibility, whatever. But I'm having real difficulty. And again, I'm all in favor of, you know, big advocate of alternative energy. I have solar at the home and all kinds of stuff. But housing for the, I mean, it just is crazy. Just crazy not to, you know, be planners and not to have that as housing. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, it sounds like there's interest in at least having another conversation about this. And there's 3 very different ideas on the table. So I guess, are there any kind of more questions for, you know, our guests tonight that would help us for our next conversation and
I have
or
one.
things that, okay, I know, okay. Or things that would help us in a next conversation. So sounds like, I think Liam and then Michael and then Monica. How's that?
Well, let me just say, you know, I think you can integrate, these were ideas, but you can integrate some of these ideas. You can have the adaptive reuse and just have it for the green zone products, so that you're not necessarily just expanding auto, but, you know, solar, wind, other energy alternatives that we haven't maybe not even sure about right now. So you can combine those issues. In regard to the housing, you know, I think we just have to face the reality that if there really was a, a legitimate possibility that housing would be there, the parcel would not have sat empty for 4.5 years. I mean, you know, I do represent a lot of local developers who've look at that, and it's just the wrong side, and it's sitting empty. So while that is appreciated, and there is that density there, and I think it's just not happening, and that's the fear is if Tesla doesn't move there, what does?
Michael?
Yeah, Liam. Would Tesla be, you know, you're talking about two parcels, one where Hannaford's is and the other one behind the Olive Garden. Would Tesla entertain the idea or consider the idea of building workforce housing on the parcel behind the Olive Garden, which is even closer to services than the old Hannaford's building?
I'm going to let my client answer that one.
Okay, Zach, you're on.
Actually, can you also clarify? I didn't realize that you wanted both parcels. So could you
No.
also
He's
confirm?
just saying, no, there's not both parcels. It's just the Hannaford Plaza. We started out with a conversation and that the current AutoZone ends at Nissan, and there's one parcel between that Nissan parcel and the Hannaford parcel, and that's this parcel behind the Olive Garden. So I don't know if they're housing developers or not.
Yeah, I would just say, well, thank you for being an owner.
This
But
one.
we have not developed housing for employees or anything to date. So that's not something we're contemplating for this location, but you know, it's a great idea. But I think for us, we're focused on the Hannaford site to build out this first sales service location in New England or northern New England.
Okay, and then I want to just clarify something for Monica. The expansion of EVs is an objective of the Climate Action Task Force. You know, we recommend or we aim to increase the number of EVs by a certain percentage by a certain date. So it is a clear objective to increase the number of EVs on the road. And I'm not sure if I understood you correctly,
Well,
but that's what I'm saying.
yeah, no, I hear that. I guess what that means is that of 100% of cars, you'd like the number of cars to go from 5% to 30%. But you are looking to diminish, therefore, the percent of fossil fuel is what I meant. So, right? Because as you're looking to increase, you'd be looking to then have them obviously not buy a fossil fuel car. So, yeah. So
Yes,
I guess
that's good.
again, my question is really thinking, I'm so excited about this opportunity. It would be amazing for so many reasons, but that's like me being very brand and not even brand, but just EV specific. So I am going to ask one question that's I'm probably not supposed to, so Paul can tell me to not, but is there anything while we work out this very important issue that you're bringing to us at an amazing time, so that we can secure you being here, is there not anything in the current auto zone that could satisfy a starting point for you while we continue this conversation?
Unfortunately, my real estate folks have not found anything, and we've done a pretty exhaustive search over the last 2 years, and have been looking at this property as sort of the one opportunity that really stands out for the region. So that we have looked, and there's just been nothing that fits our needs. I will say though, to your point earlier, which I thought was an interesting one. I think one of the things that we've seen with when Tesla comes into a town is that you do tend to see that the other dealerships tend to start getting more EVs on their lots to sell, and that's just competition brings that out. If all of a sudden people are interested in EVs, you will start seeing the Ford dealers and GM dealers asking their manufacturers to get them more EVs to sell. So I think there is knock-on effects that you'll see with Tesla coming into the market that will help get other dealerships on the auto side to electrify their offerings faster.
And
No,
Monica,
I
just
really,
for the record, Monica, there's nothing wrong with asking at any time whether there are other options for somebody to be. That's a perfectly legitimate planning question.
good. So, and to your answer, Zach, that you just gave, it's part of my, and this is to the planning commission, it's part of my then looking at that map saying like, how big do we want that auto zone to be? Because it'd be great if we could keep its size and convert it to more EV. And that's why if Zach could find a spot in there, that would be fantastic. But I hear you, Zach, so.
One other point I just want just to kind of paint the picture of what a Tesla dealership is. It is different than your typical dealership in that we don't have a lot full of cars for sale. We, when you order your vehicle either in the store or online, that's when the car gets built after that order is placed. So it is not the experience where you have hundreds, 200 cars waiting to be sold. So it is a different footprint, stylistically than your typical dealership, just from that perspective. So wanted to flag that for you, that this is not going to look like a typical auto dealership. There's going to be a lot of cars parked for cars that are being delivered and cars that are being serviced, but it's not sort of that parking lot full of cars that are ready to go, and we want folks to leave the lot with a new car. That's just not something we've ever done.
Yeah, that I appreciate that. And then I kind of go with that answer. I kind of go back to what Ted was saying, because that's a lot of space. Like, do you really need that much space if you have 25 to 50 employees and you're not going to have a lot full of cars, and that's a really big building? So couldn't there be something on the current auto zone that gives you the space that you need? But I'm hearing you on what your interest is there. Paul, Connor, I don't know if we ever have, this sounds like spot zoning to me. I don't know if we ever have the opportunity to do a short-term lease exception or something. Because I'm hoping that we find a way to evolve our auto district. And if we're evolving the shape of it, meaning maybe that parcel does become auto, because wouldn't housing be better on the lower part of what's currently the auto zone that we've talked about? So what if we were in time able to remove the southern portion of the auto zone and instead place it where Tesla's looking at coming in? But that's not a fast moving thing. So if we thought that there was the potential in the long term for that to happen, does the planning commission have the ability to authorize or support any kind of temporary, since they're leasing anyway, a temporary lease exception for a period of years?
That's not really in the option list because the zoning doesn't allow for it today. You can all decide the scope of what you want to study outside of it being spot zoning, but there isn't a short-term option, and hence Liam and Zach being here tonight to talk with you about possible medium-term changes.
Thanks. Yeah, just to pick up on that last comment, it wouldn't seem the adaptive reuse option would be spot zoning if it was citywide. Hard to see how that would be spot zoning. But I just wanted to focus everyone on the kind of embedded carbon in this building, right? To tear that building down and to build something else would release tons of embedded carbon, right? It would just be a real tragedy for the environment to tear down that building rather than reuse it. So from a climate perspective, this just seems like, honestly, a complete win from my perspective.
A question for Paul. Right now, the owner, Pomelo, is paying property tax on the property. Now, if Tesla moves in, does that automatically change, or would it be the same?
You mean from a tax perspective?
Yeah, just generally.
This is not really my area of expertise, but my understanding broadly on taxes for commercial buildings is that there is a relationship between revenue obtained and the building itself. And so you know, if a building just for years and years and years can demonstrate that it, or demonstrates being high or low revenue, that will influence the value of the building.
Mhm.
But I don't know that it's sort of going from no tenant to a tenant necessarily changes it.
Okay.
But if that's something that you'd like us to, I know the assessor.
Yeah, well, it's just a curious, I sort of, it's rhetorical. I sort of think, well, it would be interesting to know. I'm just thinking if it's sitting dormant, what, you know, one debate might be, well, let's immediately get revenue. And obviously we need that in South Burlington, but if it's not a huge difference, then that's an issue for me. I sort of feel like AOC with Amazon, because I'm sort of in the odd person out here wanting to, you know, have housing. And it seems like a large percentage of the commission is leaning towards, you know, having Tesla. So I'm just a lone person.
So I would completely disagree with Ted. We all want housing. It's just a question of where we want it.
Right, in transit zones.
So I guess go with Sarah in a second, but Ted, I don't think you're alone, but I think that there's a lot to two different things. One is
Truly
like,
respect, you know.
you know, the things to reuse an existing building, it seems like a really nice opportunity for all the reasons Andrew pointed out. So
I got it.
we'll hear from Sarah and then Paul. Sure. Sarah's gonna come up.
Thanks. I know this isn't a public hearing, but actually I was going to say basically what Monica just said. It seems like we know about Tesla that they don't have 1 million cars on the lot, and that's a very big parking lot. And gee, you know, I revert to the previous conversations. I know Tesla isn't in the housing business, but maybe the lot could be subdivided and half of it built on, you know, that big parking lot is a lot of asphalt just sitting out there. And it would be great if we could find some creative solution to solve two problems here at once. Then the other is just an observation, and it's a long evolution that's inevitably going to take place. And that is, over time, all those other dealerships along Shelburne Road are going to, of necessity, become larger and larger purveyors of EV vehicles or go out of business. So, you know, again, you can't put this into regulations or plans, I don't think, but, you know, sort of a long-term vision that over time, some of those lots could compress down, perhaps, or disappear, or convert to 80% EVs, 90% over time. You see what I'm saying? Just a long-term vision, but I don't know how to, you know, enshrine that in regulation in any way. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Sarah. Paul?
I've never been, excuse me. One thing, Lena, I wanted to mention that I remember you from the good old days of being on the city council and a couple hundred people screaming at us and you were their attorney, I think, you know. I'm not sure, I've never been sure about whether that property is Hannaford owned and managed by Pomerleau, or whether it's Pomerleau owned. I'm not sure about that. Are you guys sure about that? Are you dealing with that?
I am not that sure about that.
Yeah, you might want
That's
to
a
check
good question.
Yeah, you might want to check that out.
yeah.
I kind of think it's owned by Hannaford. I think Hannaford has the last
If
say.
you
on
look
that
at the
property.
digital parcel map for South Burlington, it shows Hannaford's as the owners of all three properties,
Right.
Lowe's, Olive Garden, Peace, and
And
Hannaford's.
that has frankly been one of the issues with that property over the years is, as I understand it, there is a fair number of restrictions on what uses can be on the property so as not to be competitive with Hannaford's.
But you're moving ahead with whomever you need to talk to about it. Or are you waiting for us?
So far, honestly, I have focused on the policy choices and zoning issues. I have not been involved in the leasing of the property. So I'm you know, as you know, my area of expertise has been real estate and land use, and on this land use, as I've been focused on giving you some options to think about. And, you know, let me offer, obviously, I've tried to draft some stuff here. If there is anything that someone wants any assistance with, I'm here to help. That's, you know, my goal is try to provide you with different options from looking at these zonings around the country and trying to distill them into some possibilities that may make sense for the community. Obviously, the challenge is the more complicated that this gets in adding housing requirements or involving other restrictions, the more difficult it becomes for Tesla to move forward with this. They you know, they would love to you know, file an application as soon as the amendment is passed. And so you know, we recognize there are some bigger issues, and you know, I have a lot of thoughts on what have come up this evening, and I'd be glad to offer that, but I really hope that the board can try to focus on some creative solution here that is beneficial to the city. I mean, this is a piece of property that could get reused and otherwise has been sitting empty. And I don't think the economics of knocking it down and then building housing really makes any sense.
Great, Zach. Zach,
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add a few points. And first, building off what Liam just said, I think, you know, we've been, as I mentioned, working on getting into the Vermont market for 2 years, and it's mostly for our current customer base, making sure that, you know, as mentioned, they currently for issues that cannot be dealt with our mobile service technicians, you know, they have to drive to Latham in New York or Peabody in Massachusetts, and that's just not a customer experience that we want to happen. So, you know, speed is important for us. We have been trying to move expeditiously with this property. We do need to work out the zoning before we can finalize everything on our end. It is a Hannaford property, I believe. So just wanted to clarify that, and again, really appreciate the discussion here. A couple other points I just wanted to add on the parking. You know, I may have misspoken in terms of kind of the parking lot usage when I talked about the different sales model. We do still use quite a bit of parking spaces for deliveries of vehicles. Like I said, this is going to be the first this should be, if all moves with due haste, this should be the first location in Maine, Maryland, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. So we expect, you know, and we don't have anything north of Westchester in New York State. So we do expect, you know, there to be some regional buyers who are going to be coming in to purchase their vehicles there and perhaps to do service there. So we do need more spaces for that. So wanted to flag that as sort of the reason why, you know, we are looking at this 250 or so spaces. And then the other thing I wanted to flag, just based on some of the discussion we've had today, and also looking at your ambitious climate plan, is that, you know, this is not only, you know, while it is a car sales location, we do, and most of our stores have displays of our solar panels and our energy storage systems. We have a big partnership with Green Mountain Power already in Vermont. So this is just another opportunity for customers to see and learn more about energy storage and solar while they're purchasing their vehicles. You know, try to get them to have a fully zero emission charging EV experience if possible. So wanted to flag that as well. And I had one other thing that I'm blanking on, but I do really appreciate the discussion. And the other thing I want to flag is, you know, there is also regulations from California. Just this is to the point Monica raised earlier, you know, which will be making the requirements on manufacturers more and more electrified or zero emission in the years to come. So we expect, you know, Vermont is already a ZEV state, as they're called, and the next generation of that, which is called the Advanced Clean Cars 2, is currently going through final regulatory approval in California, which believe Vermont will adopt. So the hope is, you know, Tesla wants all OEMs to move entirely to zero emission vehicles, but I do think there's a regulatory process that's going to be ongoing, which should hopefully get them to move that way faster.
Okay, so I think this gave us a lot of food for thought, and I think this is maybe a good spot for us to ruminate. Okay, good.
Zach, would you, would Tesla be thinking about putting solar on the roof of the old Hannaford's, or maybe solar parking canopies in the, on the parking spaces?
I would have to check with our design team, but I don't know how often we do that. I know we've done it in some instances, but it's somewhat dependent on the location and the roof. So, well, I can certainly look into that for you.
Go ahead, Paul.
Will Elon Musk cut the ribbon?
Your guess is as good as mine, but I think that seems unlikely. You might be stuck with me.
Unlikely? Oh,
A little arm twisting never hurt.
Yeah.
Paul? Go ahead.
So can I recommend, it sounds like there's interest in having a further discussion on this wherever you might land, and that I'm seeing a lot of sort of nodding heads that you'd like this to come back pretty quickly to you. We're happy to do a little thinking, but I think the main thing is for you all to just do a little bit of tonight was an introduction, get your minds flowing on it, and we'll plan to come back very quickly for you to have a follow-on discussion and decide what direction you'd like to go in.
Right.
We can't have that discussion now? What to give direction?
I
Is it
guess
too
it was my
premature?
sense that there's a lot of different ideas amongst the 6 of you, 5 of you who are here, that maybe you wanted to sleep on it, but that's up to the chair and you all, whatever you'd like to do.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we could pick. It's just getting
Happy to
late and
continue the
we don't,
discussion, but we're getting,
I think we should continue to another night.
maybe you should ask us to submit ideas in writing.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea. Yeah, to get some more feedback, so we're a little more prepared for our next meeting. I think that sounds great.
When do you feel like you need answers from us? Other than as soon as possible. Zach, when do you feel like you need answers from us?
Well, you said other than as soon as possible, and as soon as possible was going to be my answer. So, I think we are
Yeah.
trying to move as quickly as we can. We'd like to obviously, we'll have to finish up the lease. Once this is done, we'll have to begin. We're already working on the design. We've already worked on the design, but getting this built out as fast as possible. We would like to get in there soon. So. We are willing to answer questions, be available for anything, whenever needed. Liam is local. I'm not far away, and we want to be as useful as possible. So speed is important to us, but we do want to find the right place in the right community, which we think we found here. And so hopefully we can go quickly.
Yeah,
On that note,
as you know, the amendment process, has a process. Once you decide on the language, you have to hold hearings and then do the report and then get it to the city council, and then you have to hold a hearing. And so there's a built-in time process. So obviously for us, the sooner that the process can begin, that would be better.
So on that note, Liam, I wouldn't mind taking you up on your offer to draft some more. At least it would help me. And to redraft the adaptive reuse to limit it to certain uses.
I'd be glad to do that.
One question I didn't ask Zach or Liam, what does the property owner think of all this?
They would, I assume, love to rent the property.
So you've spoken to them, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Correct. We've engaged with them for several months at this point. So yeah, we are well aligned on that, and I think this is the one outstanding item we need to get through.
Okay, is it reasonable, Andrew's suggestion, to have some more detail on the adaptive management?
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
Great, glad to do it.
okay, very good. Well, until next time, thanks. And we do have some more things on the agenda. So the bylaws for committees.
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you, Liam. Thank you, Zach.
Thank
Just
you
a
all.
couple of quick points. So the council, as I mentioned a couple times in previous meetings, has adopted these bylaws for all committees, whether they're statutory committees such as yourselves or the ones that the council sets up or temporary ones that either they or you choose to set up. Most of everything in there is pretty standard and the things that you have been doing for a long time. I did want to draw your attention to, as you know, you did your work plan. Council is finalizing their vote on their overall work plan. The bylaws do ask for a quarterly reporting on progress. So that's something we're going to work with you. It's great feedback for yourselves and then ultimately for council. So that's the main thing that I just wanted to draw your attention to. The other one is just a small one, which is that the council gave the thumbs up officially not too long ago for non-statutory committees to have residents age 15 and up to join to try to encourage more of our youth to be part of committees. For statutory committees, because there is often a significant legal repercussion to the work, it is 18. But we'd still love to see lots of young people participating in our work. So those were my couple of quick things. Did anybody have any questions that they'd like me to pass along from there, or?
No, it was, I mean, it was nice to see everything all together. We hadn't really had this before.
Great. Well, that's all I had on that.
Okay, so next was minutes. So it's June 14th and July 12th.
Move to approve
We have a second?
June 14th and July 12th.
Did you second as well?
No, I said I have a correction.
Okay,
I think I
I'll
have a correction.
second and then, okay, how about you go on?
Under item 5 of the July 12th minutes, I think it says that Monica nominated Mr. Engels, but I think it was me.
Yes. It was you.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, well, would you accept that change, Ted?
Yes.
And I would also accept that change. Other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the minutes with the adjustment?
Aye.
And Monica is off the meeting, so it was just us in person voting, and it passed unanimously. Okay, did we have anything to talk about with the dates?
I just wanted to check with folks about your next meeting. Currently planned for the 23rd of August. Are folks around? That's the week right before school, so I wasn't sure if, Michael, you're gone at that point, right?
Yep. I'm gone on Sunday.
Okay.
This coming Sunday.
Wow.
Are others around or others out of town? Just sort of checking in on
My
availability.
vacation fell through. Paul and I are in the
Yeah.
same boat
Yeah.
there, so I'm here.
Well, we'll try to make it as fun as we possibly
Extra
can.
fun.
We'll all make sure we're wearing fun shirts like Paul.
Extra fun.
There we go.
There's also one on the 13th of September.
Yes.
I won't be here for that either.
Okay. Well, Michael, we're gonna get in all sorts of trouble while you're not here.
Good riddance.
I'm gonna be back
Joking.
the 15th late at night.
When are we gonna act on this thing for Tesla?
I think we're gonna put
When
it
are we
on
gonna
the,
act on this thing for Tesla? I mean, we're talking now into the middle of September, right?
we're talking
We'll
about
have
2
3
weeks from now.
special meetings.
2 weeks from now.
Well,
2
Yeah,
weeks from
well,
now.
let's-
Okay,
let's, I would say one of the next 2 meetings, let's say, if that's okay, just so that we can have a little room to make sure we've covered.
Just 'cause Michael's not here doesn't mean I
no,
can't.
no, I mean, I know. Because he doesn't want to attend a meeting in the middle of the night like he should.
It's almost morning by the time, you can
Yes.
attend the last 20 minutes of the
About
meeting.
1 or 2 in
Approve
the
of
morning. Depending where I
Like
am.
our normal
Jeez.
procedure is we hear it, we think about it, we hear what they have to say, we like ask for more information.
Well, and then we'll get a draft of option 3.
As a Hannaford shopper for many years and living in that neighborhood, I'm excited about it. So,
Yeah.
I left a bag of
Well,
that
Thank you.
food
We
with,
are
I mean, a little bit.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody who was online.
When I saw that.
That'd be fun. Away. Maybe. Yes.